So, do you want to sit or do you want to stand? What do you want to do?
I'll sit.
All right.
You stand.
No, yeah, thanks. So, born in Portland, Oregon, raised in Medford, Oregon, right?
Yes.
And was Oregon at that time the kind of mecca of track and field that it is now?
Well, there's hot spots of track and field all across the country, but at that time, Oregon had developed a really strong tradition, particularly at University of Oregon with Bill Bowerman,
Sure.
coached many Olympians, and he was actually a coach in high school in Medford, and then he got hired at University of Oregon.
So this guy is one of the seminal figures in American track. He's known as Coach, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so Oregon just had a really strong sports tradition, and particularly where I grew up in Medford, we didn't have a university, and so sports in high school really mattered.
So when you were a kid, it was just expected that you'd play a sport, like what everybody did?
Yeah, I mean, the way we grew up in those days, my parents would kick me out of the door in the morning and say, come back when it's dark.
Really?
And so we were outdoors all day and trying to look for the next game. Pickup games, flag football, tackle football, basketball, wiffle ball, everything. And then in the school, same thing. We started playing competitively at age 11 in the 5th grade, and it followed through all high school.
And how did you find your way to track and field and the high jump?
Well, first of all, you kind of end up doing what your friends do. Right. And so I played American football, loved basketball, and when we went out for track and field, early on, our teachers would have us try all events. So everybody sprinted, everybody threw the shot put, threw a softball, high jump, long jump. So we tried all the events, and when we started competitions in grade school, we could enter in any event that we wanted to. And so I did a little bit of shot put, long jump, and did the high jump. And what was just a little bit unusual in those days, in the high jump, they taught us 2 techniques.
Right.
The classic was the straddle or the belly roll, and that's what everybody used.
Well, let's talk about this, because
Sure.
The high jump was one of the original sports at the modern Olympics, right? One of the first sports. In fact, if you think, what's the Olympic? It's Altius, Fortius.
Citius, Altius, Fortius.
Right, and the Altius was stronger, higher, and higher is like, well, that's high jump.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right. So we actually have film that Dick and his wife Robin brought. This is actually, in this film we found, this is the 1912 Olympics, and this is the high jump competition.
So back in the early Olympics,
Fedora, we love this guy.
Yeah. I think they adopted a rule later that you couldn't wear your hat as a uniform.
So now these guys are doing, you were talking, this is called the scissor technique?
Yeah, correct. And that technique was used in both the standing high jump, where you just have to stand without a run and jump over the bar, and the running high jump.
The standing high jump is, and this is probably why it's no longer in the Olympics, it is hilarious. Because this guy's standing there and he goes, whoop. It's very funny. Anyway, and so the idea is, with the scissor, and this was a standard technique, you're sort of flipping your legs one by one over.
Exactly. You're going over the bar, sitting up, but your legs are doing a scissor kick.
Yeah.
And hence the name of the technique.
Right.
Now, the reason that technique was used a century plus ago is because their landing area is the same surface as the takeoff.
Right.
Dirt.
Right.
And so most of those jumpers are paying attention to landing on their feet.
So what's interesting is that the technique of getting over the bar is determined by how much it's going to hurt when you hit the ground.
Yeah, you'd like to take a second or a third jump.
Yeah, exactly. And what's also interesting is just looking at the high jump, is thinking about it. I mean, if I'm thinking about jumping over a high bar, I'm thinking, because my eyes are up here, I'm thinking about getting my head over. But the problem is getting your legs over, right?
Your entire body, but you're...
Yeah, I guess.
You know, and actually...
Oh, yeah, it's like, oh, all that part. that could be problematic.
There's the beginning, and then there is the end.
Right, yeah.
To get over it. And actually, early on, they had rules about which part of your body could go over the bar first. And so up until the 40s, they regulated how you could clear the bar. After that, though, they got rid of that rule. A couple of the athletes, Babe Diedrichson, for example, in the LA games in '32, jumped the same height as the winner, but they disallowed her jump because of the way that she cleared the bar.
Right.
So style mattered, but they opened it up.
Now, by the time you were starting to jump in high school, you explained to me that the predominant technique was what you call the straddle.
Everybody was using that.
That's how you did it. And
Western roll or the straddle.
And this is film of the straddle. This is your friend Steve from your high school team.
Right,
Not
Steve
Mike.
Davis.
I was calling Mike. So this is a film. This is the straddle technique that was what everybody did in the high jump.
So this is at Medford High School, and we're landing in sawdust.
Right. So you're landing in sawdust, so now it's a little softer than dirt, obviously.
Yeah, the technological advancements were going from dirt to sand,
right,
which was softer, and of course that's what the long jump, that's what they land in now, to wood chips and sawdust.
Right.
Softer than sand, plus you'd stack it up.
Right.
So we had a pitchfork that we would turn over the pit, after rainy Oregon days, and you learn to protect your landing.
Right. So the straddle technique is, from what I could tell, you jump over and you sort of get one leg over. Your body is parallel to the bar.
Right.
Then you go over sideways. You pull the other leg and you land on your back, on your side.
Back or your side.
Right.
Some athletes would actually flip over, and of course, the higher the bar was, the longer they're in air, more rotation they would have.
Right.
So when you're jumping at a lower height, you could still land on a foot and an arm to catch yourself.
Right. Let's talk about height. What kind of height are you clearing as a high school athlete? So what's the task here?
Yeah, high school, by the time that you got to high school, you should be jumping eye level, shoulder level, eye level, or above your head.
Well, stand up here. Let's see what this means here. So, because it would be easier for me, obviously. So you're jumping.
Well, it's all relative.
Yeah, apparently.
It's not a disadvantage to be shorter, because you just simply have to have that ability to have spring in your legs to get over the bar.
Right.
It is an advantage to be taller. All the high jumpers today are very tall. But in high school, my junior year, after I was in process of developing the technique,
right,
I was able to clear my head, set a school record clearing 6'4".
Right. So you're 6'4", and you were able to jump something as high as. And you were saying to me that that's like a psychological barrier to jump your own height.
Absolutely. Well, it grows. The barriers first are 4 feet when you're grade school, 5 feet junior high, 6 feet high school, which is my eye level. And then if you could jump over your head, that's a major deal.
Right. So let's get to it. So here you are. That's how everybody was jumping.
Yep.
You're in high school, and you start working on another way to jump.
Well, I was still using the scissors that I had learned from grade school, and by the time I got into high school, I was the only one that was still using the scissors through junior high, and I was still competitive. I could score points, occasionally win a meet, but when I got into high school and the track coach saw me that first day, he came over and chewed me out. He thought I was goofing off.
By doing it with that technique?
The scissors.
Yeah.
And so he explained to me that if I was going to reach my potential or continue to progress, I had to change my technique.
Right.
So he committed to teaching me to learn the Western roll of the straddle. So I started all over.
Okay, so you're like throwing everything out. Now you're learning to jump a different way. That's that technique we saw your high school classmate do.
Exactly.
And how's that going?
It's really bad.
Okay.
Learning to start over, you understand, okay, you're starting with the bar down low. But at the very first track meet we went to, the opening height was 5 feet. Most high school kids are jumping 6 feet and above. And I took my first 3 jumps at 5 feet, missed 3 in a row. I was out. I was the first guy out of the competition. So I established early on I was the worst jumper in my school and in the conference.
That's great.
A lot of room for improvement.
Okay. This might be a good time. I love this clip. This is why probably you decided to stick with the high jump. This is Dick running hurdles in high school. Show the hurdle flip.
If you remember the banner that Mike had designed of me running the hurdles, I was really proud of that.
So Mike is on the far right here.
Dick.
Oh, did I call you? Who
Dick.
The hell is Mike?
Where is Mike?
Where is Mike? That's
I'm
Dick.
far
Dick.
right,
yeah.
trying to chase the guy. Whoops.
Yeah. So after that, you're like, maybe I'll go back to the high jump.
So, yeah, I was really trying, but, my success was intermittent. And so after 5 or 6 weeks of working on the straddle technique, I had improved to 5'4",
okay,
which is about here, and I could scissor that. So I talked Coach into, we had a face-to-face, and I asked him if I could go back to the scissors.
Right.
And he said, well, don't give up, trying to learn, but it's your decision. And obviously, he had nothing to risk. I was at the lowest level in school, and so he opened the door, and the next meet, I started scissoring, and that's where I changed my technique from sitting on the bar. In order to clear that height that I'd never made before, I had to get my butt over the bar.
Right.
So in order to do that, I had to get my upper body out of the way. So I leaned back, and my hips came up,
right,
and I made it.
So if I'm the wrong person to do this, but so the technique is roughly like zip, zip.
Exactly.
Right? And you're thinking to yourself, well, if I need to sort of get my hips up higher, so you start turning your back to the bar and start going like that just to get your hips over?
Okay. The first step, you stand here and just support me.
Okay.
So I was going over with the scissors like this,
yeah,
and legs doing a scissor kick. In order to go higher, I started to lay back.
Right.
So the revolution was to simply lay back and go parallel to the bar.
Right.
And I raised my center of gravity with the same effort, and that day I improved by ½ a foot.
Oh, okay.
But I was going parallel to the bar.
So here's the bar, and we saw before. Could we play the one that says straddle technique again, just to watch? This is the classmate doing it. Could we have that up?
And
hello,
so what I was doing is I was trying to get in the same position that Steve was.
So his torso is more or less, I see.
Okay, so he's straddling when he's going over the bar. I was doing this, except I was upside down.
Oh, I see. So he's going over facing downwards.
Yes.
You're going over facing upwards.
Looking at the sky.
But still parallel to the bar.
Parallel to the bar.
Okay.
The next 2 years was the evolution. And so intuitively, I felt that I needed to lead with my shoulder. And so the next year, I'm going over at an angle to the bar. By the time that I got to my senior year, I'm turning my back to the bar and able to arch over the bar and develop my timing.
So there wasn't any moment where you were like, depressed and out there in the field, and all of a sudden you said, I'm quitting, I'm turning my back on high jump, and then you went, it wasn't like that. It wasn't, I mean, part of the surrounding was mentally, I was really determined to stay in this game. I was really focused on not losing. Right. That's why I was really committed to changing or finding the easiest way to jump higher. Yeah. So I was sticking in the game not to turn my back on my sport, but to stay in the game. But I also had to find the easiest way to jump the highest. And what I learned after I developed this technique is biomechanically,
I could go over the bar and my center of gravity could go under it because my head and shoulders were below the bar on one side, feet below the bar on the other. And so we're more flexible, Yogi Daniel, with our back axis rather than forward because our knees won't hinge.
Okay, so it's time to see it. This is an early iteration. This is after you've developed that technique for some time.
Right.
And this is the first video we have here today, of the Fosbury, the technique we'll call it right now. So that's Dick, and there it is. And we notice you're landing on the sawdust on your back.
I nearly made that.
Yeah, it's funny, like how many, this is like 55 years later and you're sitting there going, damn!
Yeah. And, brushing the sawdust off, but that was our environment. The technological change that happened in 1964 was the Olympic Games in Tokyo. They introduced the foam pit.
Right.
And that changed things because we didn't have to worry about how we're going to land. It let us focus on getting over the bar and clearing it. Then, if we landed on our shoulders or on our head, we're still able to get up and jump again.
So what was the environment like in the competitions as you were developing this technique over a gradual period of time? Everybody else is doing the straddle. They're facing downwards.
Right.
They're presumably winning matches that way. And then you come up and you're going over backwards, facing upwards and moving towards that technique. And what kind of reaction did you get?
Well, it varied. The other jumpers were curious but disinterested because I wasn't dominating anyone. The opposing coaches all went to the rule book to see if this is legal and test it. And obviously it was legal. The only rule in the high jump is you take off a 1 foot and you have to go over the bar.
Yeah. And you, in addition...
all body parts.
Every body parts. I would do really well except for the last part.
Yeah.
And I also understand that in addition to going over the bar differently, you had to approach the bar differently for your technique. Is that right?
Yeah. For whatever reason, and it goes back to grade school, when we've got 50 kids all doing track and field, we lined up and the line would get to the back, and whether you're jumping off your left foot or your right foot, I learned at that point, for whatever reason, to come in at a different angle and curve to the bar when I got to the bar. And that helped with the flop technique as well.
So prior to this, people had run straight at the bar. And you were running from the side, coming up, angling. And this will be familiar to anyone who watches high jump now. So you were approaching it at an angle. And did you know why that gave you an advantage?
Not till afterwards. I was simply searching for the easiest way to get over the bar and go higher. But afterwards, there was a ton of analysis done to say, what makes this guy tick?
Yeah.
Why does this work? And so, to me, I didn't care because my results continued to improve. So, as we know, with any innovation, you have to have measurables, and you have to see how that new innovation, that new creation is working. And I was showing consistent and steady improvement. Otherwise, my coach is going to boot me.
Right.
And so that's why I was able to stick with it.
Right, because you were winning. You were placing, you were doing your competitive.
If not winning, placing, scoring some points.
Right. And when did this technique get its now famous name?
Well, after I graduated from high school, I went to Oregon State to study engineering, and met my track coach, and he and I had a conversation about my technique, and he felt that he could teach me to learn the straddle. So he's a smart guy, and we struck a deal. He would teach me and coach me every day in practice with the Western roll, but I could use my technique during the meets. after a year and a half, we came down to California for a meet.
Wait a minute. So for a year and a half,
yeah.
You're a competitive college athlete. You are training in one technique under your coach every day. You're going out there jumping over the more traditional straddle. And then in competition, you do it your way.
Right.
This is nuts. How could you possibly succeed in that environment?
This is really smart. Yes, it's maybe anti-intuitive, but it's very clever because he honestly believed that he's eventually going to coach me to where I can surpass my natural technique. I had no idea, but I do what the coach says. And after a year and a half of that, we come to California. The first meet, I break the school record, jump 6'10", and coach comes to me after the meet and says, Dick, I give up. I don't know what you're doing, but it's working, and I'm going to begin studying what you're doing. He put me on a really good training program, so the beginning of '68, I got invited to some indoor meets, San Francisco All-American Games and Oakland indoors. And after the first meet that I won, jumping 6'10", I got interviewed. And of course, every writer wants to know, what do you call this? And I'm an engineering student, so being very logical and linear, I said, well, I suppose you could call it a back layout. The guy doesn't even write it down.
A back layup.
Back layout.
Back layout.
Back layout. Okay. And so, duly noted. The next meet, I jumped 7 feet, beat the Russians who were on tour, and I've got 5 or 6 journalists interviewing me. And after the meet, they asked me what do you call this? And I said, well, back home, they call it the Fosbury Flop. And they wrote it down. And it came from an article in high school, a photo with a caption that read, Fosbury Flops over bar. And the context is in Medford, we're an hour from the coast. Yeah. And on the Rogue River, a great fishing stream, at least in those days. And I think it still is. But, when you land a fish, it's flopping on the bank, and there's the action. So it was alliterative, it was a conflict, and I got the naming rights.
Here you are. Now, and this will be useful for your metaphorical conversations later. So you're this guy coming out of Oregon. You're winning meets. Yeah. You're winning meets against international competition.
Right.
You're doing this thing that nobody else is doing. And why doesn't everybody go, oh, I'll try that at this point?
I think that, once again, there isn't a coach who can teach it. There's no manual. Everything is by observation, just seeing what I was doing. And we didn't have the technology those days. Our best cameras were a Polaroid that could do 4 sequential shots that you could instantly reproduce. Otherwise, if you take a film, you get it back in 2 weeks, and you say, well, remember what you were doing at that jump? And, we didn't have the technology in those days. And the other high jumpers had invested literally thousands of hours practicing that movement and fine-tuning that technique. They're not going to take a risk on a guy that's, an outlier.
Right. Even a successful outlier.
Yeah, and once again, I was doing okay, but I was not dominating.
Right. Well, let's talk about the Olympics. So if we could put up the first slide that we have. Let's talk about the Olympics. '68 Olympic year, Mexico City.
Right.
That's not the first slide. The first slide is the logo. Can we get that up?
Yeah, he had it up.
Oh, you did? No.
There it is.
Mexico '68. 1968, we're familiar with that. Mainly, I think, Bob Beeman's long jump, and of course,
Tommy Smith, John Carlos on the podium.
So when do you start thinking to yourself, you're going to be trying for the Olympic team? When do those ideas first come to you?
Not until I qualified for the trials. That entire year in '68 had been a gradual buildup. By the time we finished the collegiate season, I won the national outdoors, qualified for the trials, and that year we had 2 trials. The first one was in LA Coliseum, and I won that to qualify for the Olympic team. That summer, we had a high-altitude training camp, South Lake Tahoe, at Echo Summit, which is about to be named a California historical landmark this summer. And we spent 10 weeks training with each other and competing against each other. With the final trials at high altitude.
So the idea was they had the first trials, but then somebody said, well, these aren't good enough because Mexico City is at high altitude. We need another trials.
Right.
So they made you do it again.
Right.
So you'd won the first trials, you were going to the Olympics. Oh, no, we need to do it again. What happened at the second high altitude trials?
At the second trials, the athletes protested. Boycotts were popular in those days. And the Olympic Committee backed off and declared that the entire team would be named as a result of those final trials. So we started the competition. I was not really prepared to compete at a high level. I was going to use this as training because I thought I was already on the team. We made it through the qualifying round, all 12 of us, and started jumping, got up to 7.3.
Now, hang on, are we talking about the trials now, or are we talking about the Olympics?
Trials.
Trials, still at the trials in high altitude.
Yep,
Go on.
to make the team. And we got up to 7.3. 4 of us left. I was in 4th place. We had all made 7.2, and none of us had ever made 7.3 before. The game was on. I needed to make this with first attempt in order to advance my chances, which I did. And the other 2 guys, Ed Carruthers and Ronaldo Brand, were my 2 teammates, and the 4th guy missed, and it was so intense. He came out of the pit, ran off in the trees, and I didn't see him again for 20 years. He was just, it was so emotional to make that team.
So it came down to the last jump that some other guy was doing.
Yes.
If he had made the jump, you wouldn't have gone to the Olympics.
Right.
He missed the jump, landed in the pit, got up, and ran into the woods.
Exactly.
And you never saw him again. You didn't see him for 20 years.
Right.
Was he in the woods the whole time?
No. He was another college student like I was, and the track for the final trials, they had carved out of the forest at Echo Summit.
Oh, that's a very famous, I've seen that.
So you've got trees, infield, big, gigantic boulders. It was a mythical Olympic trials for a kid from Oregon.
Right, we need to move on to the Olympics because we only have a few minutes left.
Yep.
So now we're at the Olympics, and first up, this is the Mexico City Olympics. This is, if I'm not mistaken, we wrote this down, this is the Olympic qualifying jump. This is Dick Fosbury, Mexico 1968 qualifying.
So at the qualifying, you could tell this is preliminary round. The stadium is empty. It's Estadio Olímpico in Mexico City. The bar's at 7 feet. And so that was the height that we had to make it into the finals.
And so you're in the finals at the Olympics. 1968, it's you, and you said another American.
Ed Carruthers.
Ed Carruthers there. Can we have the first slide? Because we wanted, I mean, it's easy to talk about in the abstract. We measured this. That bar is at what height? 6'4"?
So this is, no, I'm 6'4".
You're 6'4".
This is 7'4".
That's 7'4".
And this is the height that Ed and I were jumping in order to win the gold.
Right.
We were already guaranteed of a medal, but we had to jump a foot over our head to go for the gold.
That's
reach.
Yeah. But let's see it. This is the film of Dick Fosbury's Olympic gold medal jump.
I think this is actually 7'3".
7'3".
2 meters 22. This is, no, you're right. This is 224.
That is amazing. Gold medal, 1968 Olympics. And I'm guessing after that, people started learning the Fosbury Flop.
Immediately the next day.
Yeah.
This was the first Olympic Games that was broadcast prime time. It's in our time zone in Mexico. And so the next day, thousands of kids were doing the Fosbury Flop on couches, on their beds.
There's one more thing I want to show, and Michael, excuse me. We have one more piece of film. We have the third and final slide. Yeah, that would have been, at that time, the world record height.
No, this is the current world record.
This is the current world record.
This is 8 foot a half inch. The improvement after 46 years. Cuban Sotomayor has cleared this with simply running and jumping with his own strength over the bar.
Right. So this is interesting. This is the final bit of film we'll play, and I love this, and you'll see why in a minute. This is Dick, because you had won the gold, but you said put it higher, and you were going for the world record.
Yep.
So this is Dick Fosbury attempting the world record in 1968.
So this is 7.6.
No, wait for it. Watch this. Look at that smile. That's why I love this film. And now, what were you thinking at that moment?
It's over. I got the gold. I made 2 attempts at the world record, but the competition was over, and it was a lifetime dream, and I had that gold medal.
So, since we're out of time here, so Dick Fosbury, Olympic gold medalist, member of the U.S. Track and Field Hall of Fame, the man who changed his sport forever, went on to a long career as an engineer, and now he speaks about his experience and his inspiration and his method of innovation. And I leave it to you later to figure out what that means for your life. Dick Fosbury, ladies and gentlemen. Well done.